The line between where Robert Downey Jr. ends and Tony Stark begins is so thin that it's almost impossible to picture anyone else leading the MCU.
I am Iron Man.
Of course, Robert wasn't the only one auditioning for the role, and due to his controversial past, some producers were getting cold feet on the RDJ wagon. Enter the potential casting of Tom Cruise. Through the phases, RDJ asked to wear the costume as little as possible. We'd have to imagine that if Tom Cruise had been cast, he would have required a working Iron Man armor to fly around in. Tom never left the consideration phase, but someone that was asked by director Jon Favreau to star in the role, Sam Rockwell. Of course, he would end up playing Justin Hammer in Iron Man 2, and oh boy are we long overdue for his return in the MCU. Armor Wars? Don't let us down. It's weird to think that not being cast as Spider-Man may end up being the best route for your career, but that's exactly what happened to Timothée Chalamet. Since being a finalist to play Peter way back in 2016, Timmy has become one of the youngest actors to be nominated for Best Leading Man at the Academy Awards, a distinction he shares with the likes of Orson Welles and James Dean. Not bad company to be around. Well before what seems like the colossal push for John Krasinski to be cast as Reed Richards, he was in serious consideration for Steve Rogers. Keep in mind, this was before his 2016 turn in 13 Hours, where he transitioned from sitcom icon to action star. Another actor in serious consideration for Steve Rogers? Sebastian Stan.
Let's hear it for Captain America!
Jeez, he had two opportunities to take the shield ripped away from him. Unlike her husband, who was in the audition process, going as far as a costume-fitted screen test, Emily Blunt was actually offered the role of Natasha Romanoff in Iron Man 2, but had to turn down the role due to scheduling conflicts with the biggest movie of all time. Oh wait, no, sorry, slight hiccup. For Jack Black's literal biggest role of all time, Gulliver's Travels. Marvel's first choice for the role of Thor Odin's son? Daniel Craig. If it wasn't for those pesky Bond movies, Daniel would have swapped the pistol for the Mjolnir. While he would have absolutely nailed the Shakespearean aspect of the Kenneth Branagh film, we just can't picture him getting nearly as shredded as Hemsworth. Continuing in the tradition of sidekicks almost getting the lead role, Tom Hiddleston, prior to landing Loki, actually had a full screen test for the role of his half-brother. It's kind of hard to imagine what kind of role Bruce Banner would have had in the MCU, provided if Edward Norton stayed in the role. Well, what's even zanier is if it was actually Eric Bana still in the role. That's right, early talks at Marvel had the 2008 Incredible Hulk being a soft reboot of the Ang Lee adaptation, which would have potentially saw the return of Bana. While Eric himself is a fine actor, it's probably a good thing that Marvel distanced themselves from those Gamma Dog things. This is kind of ironic, as Norton himself was on the shortlist for the 2003 film, while Mark Ruffalo was considered for the 2008 film. I guess what I'm trying to say is, if by the off chance you lost out to a major superhero role, don't be too bummed out. Just give it like, I don't know, 4 years, they'll reboot and recast. While casting directors are out there scouring the millions of potential actors that could feasibly lead a multi-billion-dollar franchise, the studio puts out general archetypes to help guide casting agencies when they submit their clients. This doesn't necessarily mean they want that specific actor, just that they want their general vibe. A recent example for this would be for Moon Knight, where they were searching for a Zac Efron type, before landing on Oscar Isaac. Okay, maybe it doesn't always pan out the way one expects. One of these archetypes set out for Wanda Maximoff was to be Saoirse Ronan, which would have been an interesting parallel to her current career of high accolade indie flicks. Rounding out the original 6 is Hawkeye. After auditioning and not landing Captain America, Jensen Ackles was offered the role of Hawkeye for the Avengers. Due to his commitment of starring in Supernatural, he had to pass on the role. This is one of the odd times where I would have actually loved to see the casting come to fruition. Jensen seems like the perfect match for a Matt Fraction-esque take on Clint Barton. While Joaquin Phoenix would later adapt the role of the Joker in, Joker, he was the studio's second pick to play the Sorcerer Supreme after Benedict Cumberbatch turned down his first offer. Phoenix ended up turning down the role as he didn't want to be attached to a multi-picture deal. Who knows, with Sam Raimi now getting the ability to direct Doctor Strange, a project he himself originally passed on, could we potentially see Joaquin make a cameo in the Multiverse of Madness? So it turns out just about everyone was seriously considered before James Gunn cast Chris Pratt as Star-Lord. A whole slew of A-listers screen-tested for the role, from Lee Pace to Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Heck, even Glenn Howerton of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia was heavily considered by Gunn before Pratt got a chance. Glenn isn't the only It's Always Sunny alum to have almost made it onto the Guardians roster. Due to the role of Rocket being designated to VO, anyone could have nabbed the role, regardless of age or looks. This ended up leaving a hefty list of comedic heavyweights that almost got the role, including Adam Sandler, Jim Carrey, and the man, the myth, the legend, Danny DeVito. Drax the Destroyer, a being whose existence revolves around murder. As you may imagine, before Dave Bautista landed the role, many muscle-clad men were in contention, including Jason Momoa and Shad Gaspard. Turns out the casting of Drax ended up being another case of an auditionee getting turned down for the role, but offered another part in return. The person they turned down for the role of Drax? Chadwick Boseman. Of course, the role they did offer instead was King T'Challa, which Chadwick has left an irreplaceable mark on. After a decade of killing it as a TV action star through Chuck and the short-lived 24 spin-off, Yvonne Strahovski has seemingly not been able to take the step over to lead blockbusters. She was, however, in serious consideration for the role of Captain Marvel. That being said, who knows what the future holds for Yvonne? With another famous blonde character set for casting, I'd say Yvonne would make a phenomenal Sue Storm. Evan Peters is Quicksilver. Did I just send you through a WandaVision-induced nightmare?
It's alright.
As it turns out, while Age of Ultron was being developed, some of the team over at Fox, including Hugh Jackman and comic writer Mark Millar, made attempts to sway Kevin Feige to cast Evan Peters in the role of Pietro, to help bridge the Foxverse and the MCU. While the Quicksilver ship has seemingly sailed, the fate of Ralph was left ambiguous, so perhaps we may see Evan Peters again in the near future. Rounding out the list is a potential young Avenger who attended various rounds of auditions, got to the screen test, was cast, and even filmed her role before being cut from one of the biggest movies of all time. Catherine Langford was cast as an aged-up version of Morgan Stark for Tony to meet inside of the Soul Stone before his eternal rest. The scene ended up being cut as her casting was confusing to screening audiences, considering a much younger Morgan was already introduced in the movie, and it took away from the pacing of Tony's sacrifice.